Hello, degenerates, and welcome back to another media review. This time, we are going to be talking about the TV show Infinity Train. So, now this is a production that has been going on Cartoon Network and recently just had its latest season on HBO Max. So it seems like all of Cartoon Network stuff is going to be transferring over there. I do believe like the original Teen Titans and a bunch of other shows have already found their way there. And it seems like if this show does continue, that's probably where it's going to be going there. So now I remember I first encountered this show, I think when book 3 was going on, which is the third season. That's kind of how they categorize all their seasons. Each season itself is, for the most part, its own self contained story, but there are things from each book that bleed into each other as well in really nice and satisfying ways. And, since I did binge all three of these in a row, it's really nice to see exactly how they set up for the next characters for the next book. And I kind of figure I may know who the next one they're going to focus on is, but the way that book 3 ended was actually pretty different compared to the other two. And I'll definitely have to do a spoiler section for that. And I don't know if I'm going to be doing that in this video or if that's going to be its own separate thing. Regardless, when that happens, I'll be sure to have spoiler warning before we do go into that. But yeah, overall, the premise of Infinity Train is that basically you have all these people that find their way onto this infinity train. Basically, it kind of stretches forever. No one really knows how long it is, but there is a definite beginning because there is an engine at the front that's pulling the whole thing, and that's kind of all you know. In the first book, you do follow this girl named Tulip, who is dealing with some of her own personal problems, and basically by going throughout the infinity train itself, it kind of helps her overcome that, and that's kind of the basic theme of this. It's very much a cartoon version of like Twilight Zone with a bit of Westworld in it. Each train car that they go in is their own unique contained world. Sometimes they kind of plow through a couple of them just because it's a short little setup and punchline. But some other cars take up the entirety of each episode just because they're way more involved with the characters themselves, or it's just that much more complex of a car itself. And all the stories that they come up for each one of these cars and the different characters that they come into are all just done utterly fantastically. Not to mention the score for it's really well done. The voice acting is really good. But above all, the writing in this show is utterly phenomenal. One of the main goals with this show from the lead creator, which unfortunately I forgot his name at the moment, is that he wanted to make a show that kind of was not going to shy away from really tough and difficult subjects, and it's something that kids should be exposed to, and not even just kids, just adults should just know that you're able to cover these more challenging topics within animation than people give it credit for. And that is definitely the biggest strength about the show. It goes into a lot of areas that you really wouldn't expect a family-oriented show to go into, but it does, and it does it extremely well, and probably some of the most mature fashions that I've ever seen just any animated show in general just tackle these things. You'll encounter identity is definitely a big thing. Dealing with like the initial shocks of divorce. What are some other ones in there? Definitely finding out who you are, learning about like peer pressure and how it affects everybody, and a bunch of other just like really, really, just more thought-provoking subjects. Not just like, when I say it's mature, it's not just because like, oh, they use swear words and it's just very graphic. It is actually a very graphic show for a family show. I will definitely say that. It's not surprising based on that front that like some of the execs had like some concerns about it, but like I think it's to a degree that's okay. Like, kids were able to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark just fine. They were able to watch Roger Rabbit just fine. And I would say it's like, the gruesomeness that happens in those movies is basically what you can find in Infinity Train in certain episodes. And, most people watch that and they're perfectly okay. But it's just like how the characters talk. It's just in a very believable fashion outside of like the really fanciful ones that they have that are just like clearly there just to kind of be a little bit more annoying and stuff like that. But it just like the way that it handles the drama, the pacing, the music, the pathos, and everything is in some of the most believable fashions that I've ever seen a show handle it. One good show that I can really compare this to in terms of handling just heavy themes is Steven Universe. So, with Steven Universe, like obviously they talk about a lot of things, like, you know, abusive relationships was kind of one of the big topics that they had there. I'm just learning to deal with like rough parts in relationships and all that, definitely finding your own identity and things like that, and just like kind of overcoming depression. Definitely one of the criticisms that I do think is very fair for Steven Universe is because like all the episodes are like so short and contained, and for the most part the show is structured in a way that you're supposed to be able to watch each episode on its own and like kind of understand what's going on because it's an episodic one. It does have to go through some of those more complicated things in a very, very fast fashion. It does it well, but obviously sometimes it's like these topics are a little bit too complicated to really cram into like 10 minutes. So it can ultimately rush and suffer some of the endings. And I know like kind of one of the main memes is like, oh, they just kind of hug it out and it's all okay, which I do think it kind of hits that point like kind of fine, but I do understand why it would bother some people and they don't feel like it fully goes the entire way with addressing some of these topics. We're here, surprisingly, even though the episodes themselves are only 10 minutes, it does directly relate into the next thing that's going to happen, and the way the characters developed are very much dependent on what happens in each episode going forward. While you can watch these episodes by themselves and enjoy them for what they are, you only are going to get the full effect by by going sequentially through each one. And the way that it builds itself and the pacing that they were able to pull off in each one of these episodes, I do think is like done perfectly. Like, there's really not too much that I have to complain about. Pretty much like the only thing that I could, if I really wanted to, is like, you know, at times it's still a family show at the end of the day. So it's going to have like some more of like those annoying character tropes with some of the inhabitants that they come into. But at the same time, they're supposed to be going to these really weird, wacky things that don't really make sense sometimes. And, you know, that's just kind of part of the world that they live in. I wouldn't really say it's a detriment. It's just that, you know, annoying characters are supposed to be annoying. And I think it's supposed to just sort of be like that. So I don't, it's like, well, it might annoy some people and, you know, they annoyed me a bit, but it's supposed to be. I don't really think I could say that's as a negative. And especially like there are some characters that are sort of like permanent residents on this train, and the way that they even develop throughout the entire show itself, that's done extremely well too. So real quick synopsis, at least of like each book. Book one is a very good starting point in getting you introduced to what the train is, and the way that the character kind of goes through everything, I think is a very, very good starting point. It's a very nice, like, heavy subject to deal with that I think especially a lot of kids growing up today, I think it's something that they're going to be able to relate to very well. And I think like the character themselves, like throughout the most part, is the main character you follow is sort of annoying, but I think it's kind of more annoying in a more relatable, believable way rather than, oh, I don't even want to deal with this character. It might be that you actually kind of see yourself more in them than you'd really want to, but that's a good thing. So overall, I really like the way that's done. The second book, I think, is really well done as well. They kind of take this one, kind of like this. The next one is like sort of related to the first one, but it's very much its own like contained story that doesn't really affect the first or the latter book too much. About like, you know, kind of more hitting on the idea of, I would say, if you like AI humanity stories, then you're going to really like book two. It's kind of more in vein with that, except it's not AI, it's something else. When you get to it, you'll kind of see what that one is. And then the latest one was pretty cool, which is kind of focuses more on a society that has decided to adapt and live on the train permanently, and kind of the implications of that and the eventual conclusion that comes to. So with all the other ones, book 1 and 2, you can watch those perfectly fine, and those are a self-contained story. While book 3 finishes a story The story of the characters themselves aren't exactly done yet, just because there's definitely a lot of open-ended things here, and that's definitely a issue with the show right now. It's not that it's bad, it's just that for book 4 to happen, the creator does say that the views on HBO Max for this show do need to meet a certain criteria if they are going to go ahead and do a 4th season. Now, I do think you could watch all 3 of these things and you would have a fully completed, wholehearted experience with it. I would kind of relate the ending of book 3 more to the ending of season 1 of Westworld, if you want a good comparison with that, where it's like you could leave satisfied, but you might want to know more. But unlike Westworld, where it kind of completely falls apart after season 1, this one very much just through the strengths of each one of these 3 seasons. And I do think season 3 is the strongest one out of all of them, just because of just it really goes deep and like heavy with the things that it does, especially with just like how visceral a lot of the imagery is in it. I do have full confidence that they would probably just up the ante even more going forward with this season, especially with the way that the characters grow in this one, and especially with the ones that we're most likely going to follow. I do think if they do next season, I think it'd be very interesting, and I do think it is a show that you guys should support. One thing good to note, if you guys haven't started HBO Max, they are doing a 1-week free trial for it. So I would recommend just going in there and checking that, just going in there to check out that show just for free, just because it deserves all the support it can get. Easily, I think this is among the top 5 best shows that have ever appeared in Cartoon Network, and it might even be in my top 5 favorite shows of all time, regardless if it was animated or live action. I would kind of have to do a lot of retrospect because I've seen a lot of stuff in the past, but honestly, I'm just so impressed with the quality of the show, and just every single level that it hits it perfectly. And there's not really too many shows that I can say this about, that it was a consistent, thoroughly enjoyable experience throughout the entire thing too. But I do think it comes down to a couple of things. A very strong art direction, a very strong sense of the story and the progression of it, keeping it down to 10 episodes. So it's like, okay, we know exactly the pacing that we want to do for each thing, and we know the beats that we want to do for each character and each thing. And I think they do have a plan. While each story is very much its own thing, especially if you watch them like all back to back, there's kind of some patterns that you'll notice between each story that are kind of the same that happen. I kind of don't want to talk about those because it would get into spoiler territory, and I don't think I'm going to do any spoilers on this video. But, if they keep following this format and the structure going forward, this show will have a very strong future going forward, as long as they're able to get the same creative team together and they allow them to have the freedom that they have, because definitely this has been a very hands-off show just by the looks of everything. And honestly, animation itself should have more challenging media like this. Like, there's really no reason for not to have things like this, and especially for family entertainment. That's one thing that I'm very thankful for. If you've seen the other shows that I've talked about, I do think we are in a pretty good golden age of just animated shows coming out, whether it's going to be for adults or for kids. I just think we've had a lot of fantastic TV shows that have been coming out from the sector, and I do want to talk about more of them. And I think further down the line, I'll probably talk more about those. And I think I'm going to be doing it more in a retrospective view about some of the ones that I've seen that I haven't covered yet, and kind of go through like a timeline of at least the way that the industry is progressing, just because I think it is headed in a positive direction. And I do want to make sure that I'm there covering that and just kind of giving my 2 cents on all those things as well. So either way, I think that's going to come to the end of this one. So once again, highly recommend checking out this show. Everything that they've done in it is fantastic. For the people that would enjoy this, if you enjoy mysteries, things like X-Files, Westworld, and Twilight Zone, I think you're going to very much enjoy this show. The best way I would say is, imagine if they did a animated version of Westworld season 1 and it only got progressively better after that first season, or maintained the same quality. That's basically what this show is. Honestly, I don't really think there's anybody that could watch this show and not get something out of this. Like, I don't really know how I couldn't recommend this to you. It's not even that big of an investment. Once again, each episode's about 10 minutes long. There's 3 seasons and there's 10 episodes. So you're looking about 300 minutes. So it's like about a 5-hour investment to go through. So honestly, if you take a whole entire week for it, everybody should be able to get through it just fine. And I really do think shows like this should have the full support behind this. Let me know if there's any shows that you'd want me to check out in the future. It might be something I have on my backlog, and if you have, the right words for it, I might actually just jump right into it. The other thing too is if you've watched Infinity Train, what were your thoughts on it? If you guys do have spoilers in the discussion, make sure you please clearly label it, just because it's best to not go in the show with any spoilers at all. Because like with me, I saw like one scene in book 2. I'll just label it the gruesome scene. And that's all I knew about it. And I actually forgot it's from Infinity Train until I saw it. I just remember the tweet that I saw was, "This is the most brutal death I've ever seen in a children's animated show." I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's downright like, oh man, I can't believe they approved of this. But definitely in a good way. And the good thing is, because I don't think it mentioned it was from Infinity Train, or if it did, I just completely forgot it. So when I got around to that scene again, and I didn't even recognize the characters until that scene came up. So that was really good. So going in spoiler free and just like kind of seeing like just how much they push it, I do think is a big strength going into this show. However, if you do get some minor spoilers, as long as it's not story related, I still think you're going to be able to enjoy this regardless. So either way, use that free trial, check out the show, give it the support, and spread the word, because this show is going to live or die on depending how many people do end up checking it out. So highly recommend it. Definitely go through it. And even if it doesn't get a book 4, what is here is more than worth your time for it. If you're a creative person, or if you're just looking for a good, challenging story, this is definitely it. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys check it out. And definitely let me know down in your comments in below what you thought of it, what your future recommendations are, so we can have further discussions on this. And with all of that said, take care of yourselves until the next one.